Hey guys, it's Kevin in my review for the Willoughbys. And what the Willoughbys is essentially about is basically we center on, well, the Willoughby family is pretty much isolated from the rest of the world. They live in this more Victorian household while everything else is pretty much updated to modern standards. So, but specifically the children who have these parents that are very neglectful and honestly pretty terrible at what they do. And it's gotten to a point where they are just really fed up by what's going on. So one day they're finally let out of the house and things like that, and they stumble across this ad where basically they'll find a way to get their parents to go on vacation. However, they plan on them actually dying in the case so they can become orphans and basically start to live on their own. But things are shaken up once the arrival of this nanny comes into the picture and basically gets the Willoughbys to start to realize how much they should care about one another and things like that, and hopefully giving them the love and devotion that they really do deserve. So the Willoughbys overall, I was excited actually for this film because I feel like Netflix recently has been doing some really good stuff animation-wise, and yeah, like I say before, I mean, a lot of Netflix films I go into pretty skeptical, but this is one that I did actually have a lot of hope for, considering that their last animated film was fantastic. I really love Klaus quite a bit. I think that was a really great animated film. I think it was I love, the hand-drawn animation and things like that. It's different from most that we see, and so hearing that we're going to do another one with, again, kind of a different kind of animation, I definitely became pretty interested because I feel like there was a lot of potential for this film. I really like the plot and things like that, and so I finally watched this movie, and I have to say, I was pretty disappointed. The Willoughbys, I think, is maybe the most disappointing animated film of the entire year so far. It's a film that just has so much potential. There's so much that this film could do, and it just completely falls flat. It doesn't realize its full potential at all, and there's so many things that really do bring it down, but we're just getting to right now, starting off with the voice cast, and look, I will say this. There are a lot of things that aren't working in this movie. For the most part, I don't think the voice cast is one of them. I think the voice cast overall is really good here. Let's talk about Will Forte, because he is the lead in this movie, but he is playing this younger kid in Tim Willoughby, and that can be really hard to pull off because, you are an adult, and sometimes it can be very hard to take you seriously. It could really take you out of the movie. And getting Tim Willoughby's character aside, I think Forte actually did do a pretty good job here. I overall was convinced at what he was doing. I thought overall his performance was pretty solid here, and I thought overall he did an okay job. But I think the real standout of this movie for me is absolutely Maya Rudolph, who plays the nanny here, who I just thought was fantastic in this movie. This is yet another really great performance from her. And I say this about Maya Rudolph, when she goes for it, she is a phenomenal actress, and it's performances like this that really do, I think, get to show that, because she does a really excellent job in this film as really the nicest character in the entire movie, someone that generally does want to help these orphans, generally wants to take care of them, and I just thought overall she did a really great job. I was very impressed by her in this film, and I thought that she was just a lot of fun here. She was very nurturing, she was very sweet, and I just thought overall, out of everyone in the movie, she was probably the big standout here. I really did like what she ended up doing. The rest of the cast also is pretty good. Alessia Cara, I thought, did an alright job as Jane Willoughby. I definitely did like her here. And I also really did like Sean Cullen a lot as the Barnaby siblings. They are a lot of fun in this movie. There's not a lot to them character-wise. They're kind of just like the creepy younger twins that are almost always talking in unison and have this really like eerie demeanor to them, and they're a lot of fun to watch. And I thought Sean Cullen did a really good job at portraying these two characters. They are definitely one of the best parts of the movie, and I definitely did enjoy them a lot. The one role that I think some people are going to be concerned about is Ricky Gervais, who plays this cat in the movie, and I thought he was alright for what he had. He definitely is Ricky Gervais. He doesn't really do much to add to this character. He pretty much just plays Ricky Gervais, but if you like his comedy, then go for it. He's very hit or miss with me lately, so some of his jokes work, some of them don't. It's pretty much just Ricky Gervais, is what you expect. Terry Crews, though, was actually really good in this movie, though. I was very surprised by how good he really was here. The two performances here that just do not work, though, unfortunately, are that of Jane Krakowski and Martin Short. The problem is not the actors, because they're great, obviously. They're great actors. Martin Short is phenomenal, and Jane Krakowski is a great actress as well. But here, they're just way too over the top, to the point where it's hard to believe that these are actual people, that they're actually going about this. It almost feels like they didn't have the proper direction to really dial it down, because we know that these two can be great. So you have to wonder, like, what is really causing this to happen? Why are they acting so obnoxious? Why are they so over the top compared to everyone else? And I think, again, it's really just they were not given that proper direction that they really need, and it really does show, unfortunately, as a result. I had a very hard time really liking either of them. I did not think that either of them were really that great in this movie. Again, I love Martin Short, but it just really was not working here. They honestly felt more like they felt less like they were in a movie and more like they were in like a over the top like stage production. And that's really weird, because I've seen these two be great before, but they were just not good at all in this movie. I thought they were just way too hammy, and just it was to a point where it was very hard to watch them at points. I thought they were easily the worst part of this movie in terms of voice acting, but aside from them, everyone else does a pretty good job with what they have. But now let's get to the directing and the writing, because this is where we really start to get to the things that unfortunately I think really do bring this down, particularly the directing here from Kris Pearn, because you look at the plot to this movie and you can tell that, yeah, this is a lot darker than most family films out there. There's, there's definitely hints of murder in this movie. There's hints of, there's hints of child abuse in this movie. There's hints of all kinds of things. And so you would expect for this film to be very dark, maybe have some really dark humor in there. And that's really not the case. Aside from a few scenes towards the end, this film is pretty much just your regular family film. And I think that's the biggest problem with it, is that this film plays it way too safe. And I think that's why this film just ultimately did not work for me. The tone here is just not right at all. It's one of those films where I feel like it's honestly too fun. And I never really say that, with a family film. But I feel like that's the problem with this movie, is that it's almost too fun in the way it's being executed. Like this, you can have fun with this movie, but I feel like this should have been a lot darker, a lot more emotional, and it's just not there. And when the movie tries to add those darker elements, it feels forced, because more often than not, it relies on just being a really silly and overly energetic family film that I think a lot of people are going to have a really hard time being able to stand, just because of how frequently cringy it can get, how just really obnoxious it can get as well. And so I think that really is the biggest problem with this movie. It also doesn't help that most of the jokes, not all, but quite a large majority of the jokes in this movie really do fall flat here. It almost feels like they don't really know who this movie wants to be for. There are moments in here I think little kids are going to enjoy, but the plot and subject matter might actually be a little too much for them, because it is actually a very dark film. There's a lot going on story-wise that I don't think they're going to be able to handle. So I just don't think Kris Pearn did a really good job of finding that balance where it's something that kids and adults can enjoy. I didn't really feel that way. I felt like there were points in this movie that I could enjoy, but for the most part, I felt like this is something that isn't really for me. And I don't really feel like with the plot that's in this movie, I should be feeling that, It's just very weirdly directed overall. I don't think the directing was very good here at all. The writing also does not help it in any way. The writing is not good in this movie. In fact, it's probably the worst thing about this movie. Because again, I think the plot here is great. I love the idea that these kids are just in this horrible home and they have these parents that are just so hostile to them, and so they try to devise this plan to like get them away, but then this nanny comes over and she starts to get them to care more about things. I think that's a cool idea in concept, but the way it's executed is just not working for me at all because it's so unbelievable in the way that it's handled here, especially when it comes to the parents themselves. I mean, these parents are so cartoonishly evil. And I get it that these are supposed to be parents that do not want kids. I understand that. But you mean to tell me that these parents that are so cartoonishly evil to the point where they literally won't even let their kids eat. There's literally a scene early on where they're eating and they like chastise the oldest son for like eating. And then Jane Willoughby like eats the piece of meat as they're speaking. Like, you can't make me think that they've done this all their life. Like, these kids would not survive if they did this. Like, this doesn't make any sense. And I get it. It's an animated movie, but it just doesn't make any sense why the parents would do this. Why they even want these kids. Why did they have more kids? It doesn't make any sense to me. We're also supposed to believe that they have kept them outdoors that they have kept them from, like, shelter them from the world entirely. There's a scene where they're finally going outside and they can't believe like all the hyper technology and things like that, and it's like, these are young kids. Like, again, I don't believe that they've been without this for so long. It doesn't make any sense, really. And it's to a point where it just doesn't feel believable. If they would have gone about this in a different direction, give me more of a reason as to why the parents can't stand their kids and why they are so neglectful and hateful towards them, then I could maybe understand it. But they're so unlikable to the point where it just really took me out of the movie. And it doesn't help that the characters in this movie are honestly kind of nothing. I mean, there are definitely some potential for some really fun characters. I already touched upon the Barnabys, who really were the only time I laughed in this movie. Again, I didn't laugh much, but anytime I did laugh, it was something the Barnabys were saying, because I thought they were actually really fun characters. And I did, to an extent, like Jane Willoughby as well, although I don't really understand why she has to keep singing throughout this entire movie, aside from the fact that Alessia Cara is playing her, and they clearly want to bank off her, musical talent by having her sing every 5 seconds, which I don't have a problem with, but it just kind of makes me think this movie maybe should have been a musical or something. It also makes me feel like she should be the main lead here, mainly because the person we follow is maybe the least interesting character out of everyone in this movie, and that's Tim Willoughby, who I just could not stand here at all. From the beginning, he's just way too overly energetic in this film. He's freaking out every 5 seconds. He's kind of a wimp, honestly, with just how scared he is of everything. But I did like the way they were setting him up, with him caring a lot about the way this family used to be, really getting into his ancestry, trying to figure out, what could have gone wrong. I think that's a good idea. The problem is he makes so many hasty decisions in this movie and then kind of like backtracks on it that it's just very hard to read this character. He doesn't really have much of an arc. Any potential for them to do anything interesting with him is pretty much dodged because the movie doesn't really have the time to fully dive into it. And so overall, he's just a really boring lead character, and his relationship with Maya Rudolph's character, the nanny, as well, is very confusing. There are points in the movie where it seems like he doesn't want much to do with her because he doesn't feel they need her. But then suddenly he likes her, and then suddenly he doesn't. It's very confusing in that way, and I think the biggest issue with this movie is just how quickly it moves through things, and because of that, I think it really sacrifices a lot of character here. Again, Jane, there's not much to her. She's really just in this, like, adventurous little girl that keeps singing every 5 seconds, and the Barnaby twins are just creepy, and even the nanny, there's not much to her other than she's just a really sweet lady that is really the first person that really cares about these kids and wants to help them and wants to provide for them in a way that their parents can't. So again, because these characters aren't that interesting, really does bring a lot of this movie down. And look, I'm not saying that every animated movie needs these really deep characters, but the characters in this movie, they don't really feel like characters aside from like Tim Willoughby and the nanny. They don't really feel like characters here. They feel more like plot devices than anything. The parents especially feel like plot devices here because again, just the way that they're talking to each other is so unbelievable in that way. It's honestly really hard to watch at points, and so yeah, that just wasn't working for me. And like I said, the humor in this movie, a lot of the time, not always, but a lot of the time was just not good at all. I was not laughing a lot during this movie very much. A lot of the time, I just really found myself being taken out of it, and that really did bring things down. And the other part of it, and I hate saying this, is Ricky Gervais's narration. Look, I know some people are saying he's one of the best parts of this movie, and yes, he definitely has some fun scenes, and I do like the fact that he's kind of making fun of narration, but at no point did I feel like this movie needs a narrator. If anything, I kind of felt like it was a hindrance to the movie. I kind of felt like if Gervais wasn't here, if you get this cat out of the movie is actually a little bit better because there's so many things that he is telling us that we don't need to be told. I would have much rather have seen them played out. And this is and the other thing that's so perplexing about that, this isn't even a cat that is like the family's cat. He's just a cat that's like observing things, and there's so many parts in this movie that are events that he was never even involved in. So it's like, how does he know this? Is this like a first-hand account? It's just a really weird choice. I don't know if this was one of those things where Ricky Gervais said he would only do this movie if he could like narrate it or something, but it very much felt like that was the case. This did not at all feel like he was supposed to be in this movie originally. It really just felt like a last minute thing, and every time that he spoke, it just really took me out of the movie. And like I said, I think it's a real disservice to the plot, real disservice to the character, because things are just moving far too quickly in this movie, and I think that really does hurt it overall. And also because we spend so much time on characters like that, we aren't given enough time with, say, Terry Crews's character. This guy runs a candy factory that I actually think could be a really fun character, but there's just nothing to him aside from the fact that this baby that the Willoughbys run into, he like forms a connection with. But that plot line is so underwritten in that way. It doesn't feel like we really get anything interesting going on there. So yeah, there's so many things that I think could work in this movie. There's so many things writing wise that I want to be good. Even the message of this film, I don't think is a bad one, but the way that it's executed is so forceful and emotionally manipulative. And again, I think it's just its biggest issue is that it's not focusing enough on the things that it should. I think if we had a really good story, if we had some really solid characters, this could be a really good movie, but it focuses on the worst characters possible, and as a result, it just makes it a very hard movie to watch at points. However, the one thing that I think definitely does elevate this film tremendously is the animation here, which is fantastic. I actually like this world a lot, and that's what annoys me about this movie is that the animation here is so good. It's very creative and different looking. I like the contrast between how the Willoughbys house looks and how the rest of the world is like so futuristic in that way with all these like tall skyscrapers. I think that's a really fun and clever idea, and I feel like that's easily the best thing about this movie is that the animation just looks really great. Especially this scene towards the climax, I thought really stood out to me in terms of animation. And again, I honestly don't feel they utilized it as well as they could have. I feel like there's so much you could do here, like humor-wise, and they just didn't really do that here at all. And that was weird to me. So yeah, that really didn't work. Also, for a movie that has such a dark premise and a movie that centers on, the kids practically trying to kill their parents, there's not a lot of, there's really not a lot of authentic moments in this movie. You would think that that would lend itself to a really dark plot, like I said. But anytime the movie tries to get emotional, anytime the movie tries to do something just the least bit, like, effective character-wise, it just like dodges through it. There's a scene with Tim where he makes this really weird decision that honestly is really out of character. And the film just like glosses over why he even did it. It kind of puts him in this conflict with a character, and then they're just like fine, and it's like, no, I want to see you like develop this. So again, that's what I'm saying, like it's too short of a movie and it's too focused on the wrong things, and I think that's really what does hurt it, unfortunately. The score here is also really good. I like the score a lot in this movie. It's very powerful, and it honestly gets the point across, I think, a lot better than the script does. I think the music here by Mark Mothersbaugh is so great. I think he did a really great job scoring this, and definitely one of the best parts of the movie. Like I said, the editing is one of the key things that just really does bring it down. I think 92 minutes is not the right length for this movie. This movie needs to be at least an hour and 40 minutes long, and I think they could have gotten a lot more done for sure. There's so many scenes that feel shortchanged. There's so many scenes that don't feel like they're as dived into as they could have, and the ending especially is so ridiculously rushed that I telegraphed every single thing that was going to happen like 30 minutes before it did. That's how predictable this film can get. So unfortunately, what we're left with here is a huge missed opportunity, unfortunately. The Willoughbys could be a really great film that could have actually been something really dark, really different, could have told this story that was done in a very unconventional way. It could have focused on some great characters. It could have had a little bit more to it, but unfortunately, because it's constantly focusing on gags, because it's constantly glossing over story, important story points, much of it because of the narration from Gervais's character, and because of the fact that the movie is so short. Unfortunately, this is just a film that did not really work for me much at all. I think it is far too silly than it should be. I think this film should have been a lot darker. I think it should have think it should have utilized that plot a lot more. It has characters that just aren't believable in the slightest. There's so many scenarios that these characters end up in that either they feel way too convenient or they're just very unbelievable to the point where it was very hard for me to suspend my disbelief. It's got some great animation and it's got a great premise, but unfortunately it's just focused on all of the wrong things, and because that, it ends up being maybe the most disappointing Netflix film so far this year. So I am going to give the Willoughbys overall a C minus. But over, guys, in my review of the Willoughbys, let me know what you guys saw this movie. All of your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.